Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Climate and Environment Committee meeting of the 24th of June 2025. Welcome to our members of the committee and staff who are supporting us. So first of all, I would like to ask Mr. Moore to read the council blessing.
Thank you. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just, so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership in a spirit of harmony and compassion.
Thank you very much, Michael. So now we'll move on to item 3, which are apologies. So we have a number. So we have Anne Mahasidwell, Kim Tahiwi and the Mayor. And we have Simon Black on Zoom. Can I have a mover for the apologies? Mr. Moore, seconded by Councillor Hanford. Thank you. So item 4 is, all those in favour? Against? Passed. So now move on to item 4, which is declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. I haven't been notified of any. Do any people have any now? Thank you. Now we'll move on to public speaking time. No requests have been received, so that's also very quick. So now we'll move on to item 6, which is we have a deputation from the New Zealand Drugs and Wastewater Testing Program. And so we have Marissa Cliff and Andrew Chappell, who are online. So can you hear? Hi, Marissa, how are you? And Andrew,
hi,
hello.
thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to this meeting via Zoom. Really looking forward to what you're going to have to say and letting us know, I suppose, how the program is working in New Zealand as well as in our local area. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. I'll have a go at sharing my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. So, kia ora koutou, ko Marisa Cliff toko ingoa. I am here representing the National Drug Intelligence Bureau that's housed by police, and I've also got Senior Scientist Andrew Chappell from ESR who's going to talk to you today. Andrew's responsible for the Drugs and Wastewater Program, manages the program, also initially set it up in the first place, so he's a wealth of knowledge, and he'll talk to you about how it's going to work. This is always awkward presenting online, so please let me know if you can't hear me or if I'm going too fast or anything like that. Just yell out because I can't see you, so just let me know.
All perfect so far.
Great. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the NDIB, New Zealand's National Drug Intelligence Bureau, what we do, give a really brief overview of New Zealand's illicit drug environment, and then of course we'll talk about the Drugs and Wastewater Program, and I'll hand it over to Andrew who will tell you about how it all works. And then I'll talk a bit about the data and the results for your region, and then how we might use this information. And then hopefully there's some time for questions if that's how you want to work it. So let me know if that's you're seeing a change in slide.
Yes, we have. Yep.
Great, perfect. So briefly outlining, the NDIB is a multi-agency strategic intelligence unit, and it's comprised of representatives from New Zealand Police, New Zealand Customs Service and Ministry of Health. So our job is to understand the New Zealand illicit drug environment and produce products that recommend operational and policy settings that help reduce drug harm. And we do that by addressing both ends of that supply and demand spectrum. And of course, we manage the police side of the National Drugs and Wastewater Testing Program, and that's in close partnership with ESR, as you can see with Andrew presenting today with us. So as an intelligence unit, we collect information from a wide range of sources and agencies, and we do use all of that to inform our assessments and understanding of the drug environment. And the wastewater testing is one aspect of that. So we use this information alongside other information sources. So really briefly, New Zealand's drug environment is influenced by international availability and supply. And at the moment, global manufacture and supply of illicit drugs like methamphetamine, cocaine, ketamine is all increased. We've got organised criminal groups that are responsible for that large scale supply around the globe, but also into New Zealand. There's increasing availability of illicit drugs online, and this enables access to a wider range of drugs. And the use of that social media and online platforms also increases accessibility for people that may have shied away from accessing drugs by those traditional kind of drug house type routes. There's numerous trafficking routes and increasingly sophisticated concealment methods. You can see on the map up there that's showing some of the methamphetamine trafficking routes impacting the Pacific. And you can see that it's really coming from many directions. So all of this means there's been increasing supply of illicit drugs to New Zealand, and this has been evidenced in increasing quantities seized at the border, but also we're seeing it in our wastewater testing as well. Why? Because we pay some high prices, we have quite high demand for a small nation, and we're increasingly interconnected through our international organised crime networks, and that enables that access to that increased global supply. So, illicit drug supply causes a disproportionate amount of harm in our communities, but understanding drug use and associated harm is quite difficult. And this is because that drug use is often hidden, with harm or victimizations going unreported. So, wastewater testing is one way that can help us with this understanding. And it's the best method for determining illicit drug consumption levels because it's unbiased and it's quantifiable. So here's an overview of the wastewater testing program, and it's a collaboration between the NDIB and ESR with participation from our city councils as key contributors to the program. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you guys for your participation and also this opportunity to speak to you today. The full program has been running for over 6 years now, and over this time it's grown to sample from 62 sites across the country, and we capture data from up to 76% of the population. And this means that we're actually working with around 50 different councils that contribute to this program. New Zealand's drugs and wastewater program is world leading, and it's really comprehensive population coverage, frequent testing, and also the real world applications for the data that it generates. We sample for 7 consecutive days every month for main sites and every second month for some regional locations. And within the Kapiti Coast District Council boundaries, we receive samples from Parapara-Umu, and that's sampled every second month. So sampling consists of collecting wastewater every 10 to 15 minutes over a 24-hour period, and that's so that we can have a representative sample of all times of the day. And this also gives us daily data so we can compare trends over those weekdays and weekends, as well as that kind of weekly consumption estimates over time. We test for indicators of consumption of methamphetamine, MDMA, cocaine, fentanyl, and heroin. And we've recently added ketamine and 4 synthetic cathinones, but these aren't comparable in the same way to the consumption estimates for those main drugs that we test for. So we're still working out a way to report those. We have also introduced a floating site, or what we call Site X. And this means that we've factored in the capacity to be able to test from up to 4 different locations across New Zealand that aren't part of that long-term testing. These might be locations where we're hearing of drug harm or issues, and we just want to gain insight into a snapshot in time of drug use of that location. It doesn't provide as much value as gaining those long-term trends, but it can help to assess the need of a community that might otherwise be overlooked because it can't be part of the program. So how does it all work? Well, I'll get Andrew to talk you through that process and the science behind it. And it's really the hard work of Andrew and his team that's allowed this program to grow into the reliable and thorough program it is today. So Andrew, if you want to take it away, just tell me when to change the slides.
Thank you. So I'm just going to quickly go over some of the practical sides about how this works, and then we'll hand back to Marisa for what the really important part is, which is the data that we're generating and what's happening at the end of the day. So in terms of how this works, it basically is a what goes in must come out sort of model. So people use drugs, it gets metabolized in the body and then excreted in their urine as either the drug that they took or as a metabolite. And we're actually testing for both to make sure we don't miss anything. And so what that means is that some people in the community are taking drugs. They all go to the toilet though, and so we end up with a big mixed pool of everything in that community that gets flushed down and ends up at the wastewater treatment plant. So this is actually a really ideal location to collect the samples and get a picture into what's happening in the community. Next slide, please.
Sorry, it doesn't seem to want to be working right now. Here we go.
I think, Marisa, you've actually stolen most of my thunder for this slide.
Sorry.
Which is fine, but it's good. So it is really important. This is actually the most important part of the whole process, to be completely honest. Without a high quality sample, we can't produce high quality data. And so we really rely on councils to collect those samples for us. So as Marisa mentioned, I think we've got 62 or 63 different sampling sites at the moment. So it's a huge operation and not something we could do without support from our partners. So we need auto samples, really important. Occasionally we'll get a grab sample, but it's really important that we don't miss anything during a day. So to have these composite samples is important for us. A lot of the bigger councils have their own. For the smaller councils, we provide auto samplers to use to get these high quality samples. And we understand it's an imposition on councils, and so we try really hard to make sure that we've minimized that as much as possible. So there's no external costs. So we, as I said, provide auto samplers if they're required. We also provide pre-labeled sample bottles with the dates and everything on. We provide courier tickets, so there's no cost there. It's just the time to collect the samples that we need your help with. And then we also, is really important for our calculations afterwards, that we know what the population of the catchment area is, because we normalise it for the population so we can compare, for example, Paraparaumu and Auckland. And we also need to know the flow data for each day, because you can imagine if there's been a lot of rainfall, the flow is higher, so therefore the wastewater is diluted. So we account for that. Next slide, please. So this is my favourite part. Probably not many other people's, but that's all right. So I'll go really quickly through the lab procedure. Won't go into any detail, don't worry, but you can get hold of me afterwards if you're really interested. So we do receive a lot of samples. So this is a big operation. We get 150 samples every week. And that's, we've got a lab with about 5 people working in it at the moment, dedicated on this program. So when these samples arrive, a litre each, they're all filtered to remove the chunky bits. We have to adjust the pH and then put it through a solid phase extraction process, which is a process that allows us to clean up the sample but also concentrate the sample. And that's really important, because the reality is that the concentration of drugs in the wastewater is actually really low. And then we do a few other processes and analyze it by LCMS, which means we separate the extract that we create into its individual components, so each individual drug, and then we measure it by its atomic mass, which is really specific and allows us to be both sensitive and specific. So we're really sure that we've got the right drug. And it's a question that's come up quite a lot lately. We're not confusing methamphetamine with the pseudoephedrine that's been allowed back in pharmacies and so on. And then after that, we do our data analysis, which takes quite a long time. We have to be really confident that we've identified the drug and it's not a mistake. We don't want to share that with the NDIB and find out it was wrong. So we have to be really confident we've got it right. We perform those back calculations to determine how much was consumed, because no one's really that interested in how much is in the wastewater, and then we do the reporting. Next slide, please. So I mentioned just how sensitive it was, and so we can detect down to about 0.1 parts per trillion, which is incredible, but it's also very hard to imagine. So to put it into context, we can detect, if a drug was a stone, just a single stone, we could detect that anywhere on State Highway 1 between Whangarei and Invercargill. And we could do that for every drug with every sample every time. So it's incredibly sensitive, and that's how we're able to detect not only methamphetamine, but some of these other lesser used drugs as well. And next slide, thank you. So what's next? We've been expanding over the last few years, adding more sites and so on, which is great. But this is a dynamic program. The drug market, as Marisa knows all too well and is educating me on, is really dynamic. So there's new drugs coming along, especially these novel psychoactive substances. And so we can't have a program that's set in stone. So we're always looking at adding new drugs to this methodology. And also new ways to use the data. And that's part of what we're trying to do, talking with councils in forums like this. And one of the things that we're really keen on doing is making the data more publicly accessible. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that, maybe after this, either in a discussion or by email or something afterwards, because we really believe that by making it more publicly available, it doesn't reflect poorly on any councils, but this does mean that the data can be used for harm reduction more effectively. And then just really quickly, in terms of a proof of concept, this project's been really good. It's shown that it's worked really well for the drugs and shown that there's a lot of information in wastewater that's just being flushed out to sea. And so we're starting to look at ESR, what else we can investigate. Obviously, COVID was something that happened a while ago, and another team at ESR was looking at that, but on the chemical side, we're investigating other things like antimicrobial resistance. Obviously, pesticides is an area of concern, so exposure to humans, but remembering we're talking about human health. And I'm working with a student from the University of Auckland at the moment looking at cancer biomarkers to try to identify any communities which might have higher levels of cancer than anticipated, because people aren't necessarily seeking help from the doctor early enough. So that's all from me. I'll pass it back to you. Thanks, Marisa.
Thanks, Andrew. So Andrew and the team worked really hard to generate the data, and then they passed that on to us at the NDIB. And that data generated provides us with insight into consumption trends over time, as well as that kind of use profile of the different drugs. So I talked about how we get the daily collection, representative samples of each day. And this gives us information around whether consumption might be indicative of dependent or recreational use. So you can see the bar chart up there. Blue is methamphetamine, your muddy mustard is MDMA, and orange is cocaine. This is an example of a daily use pattern that really sort of shows that increase in MDMA use over the weekend and cocaine use over the weekend that is sort of, reflective of recreational use. But you can see that the methamphetamine is more consistent over every day of the week, and that's we see that across every location that we test from, that methamphetamine use is more indicative of that dependent use, that daily use, and that's representative of how the drug is used and how it impacts your body. We have also the great value out of it is that long-term monitoring, and it gives us information on whether a site or location might be going against that general trend seen across the nation. And this can highlight locations to focus on for supply and demand reduction, but then also, if your location's not showing such high consumption, maybe it's opportunities to work in that prevention space rather than the that kind of mitigating space. So really important that we discuss what it can and can't tell us. And while it provides that excellent quantifiable information on those consumption trends over time, it can't tell us who's consuming drugs, how many people, or if that level of drug use is harmful or problematic for the community. So this is a measure of health and well-being of an entire community. We measure from the whole catchment of a wastewater treatment plant, so it's not a targeting tool. But because it can't tell us if it's harmful, then we need to consider this information alongside those other indicators and information sources that I sort of mentioned earlier. So if all other sources are suggesting that the level of drug use is causing harm in a community, then the actual amount of drug use is less relevant. And so we need to be really careful when we look at this data that we don't just take it on its own. Because there's different impacts from different drugs and in different communities. So keep that in mind. So we'll get to some results finally. What's happening in this national picture? We can see this graph illustrates how around in the middle of 2024, we saw a really marked increase in methamphetamine use, and that's across all testing sites nationwide. So this is showing the estimated weekly consumption across all of the sites that we test from. You can see MDMA use remain relatively steady over the last 3 years. There's some spikes, but actually the general trend is quite stable. And cocaine use has been slowly increasing from barely anything. We went from cocaine only being detected at a number of sites to now it's detected at every site, every month we test, but still a lot lower use than methamphetamine, but it is showing that gradual increase associated with a steady growth in demand for cocaine. Meth's increase was sudden, and it's been sustained over the last 9 months of testing. So alongside that sudden increase, we also noted other indicators of a shift in market dynamics, like a decrease in price, and other agencies and sources of information for the NDIB are also indicating that meth use has increased alongside what we're detecting in the wastewater. So, Paraparaumu. You guys saw an increase in meth consumption too around the middle of 2024, but it's not to that same extent that we saw in some other locations. You can see methamphetamine use in Paraparaumu is consistently below that national per capita consumption rate that's measured across all the testing sites. So probably better to work in that kind of prevention space for you guys. MDMA is also relatively low and it's been kind of stable over the years as well. And cocaine use is showing a slow increasing trend in Paraparaumu, but again to a lesser extent than we're seeing in some other locations across New Zealand. Still, cocaine use is below that national per capita consumption rate, showing that it's not as high as some other locations. So in comparison with other sites, you'll note I've blocked out the other sites' names, and that's because I haven't asked for permission to share that with you. So I've just popped in Paraparaumu, and you can see all the police districts that the sites are located within. Just I haven't named the individual sites in this instance. So this graph's showing the average per capita consumption rate from between 2021 and 2023 in the light blue, and that's compared with the 2024 average consumption in the dark blue. So you can see that methamphetamine use increased at most sites in 2024, and that includes Paraparaumu, but Paraparaumu methamphetamine use is relatively low compared to a lot of other sites, particularly other sites in the North Island. we tend to see with methamphetamine kind of north of Wellington has higher use, and then south of Wellington generally has lower methamphetamine use. And I'll just show you the cocaine as well, because cocaine also saw a big, it's been showing increasing consumption rates. So again, it's that comparison of the average between 2021 and 2023 compared with 2024. And again, pretty much all the sites have shown an increase, including Paraparaumu. But again, Paraparaumu's cocaine consumption is relatively low, especially compared to some of those sites within Tamaki Makaurau. So what does all that mean? We can use the wastewater estimates and convert them into things like doses and the estimated amount of money spent and that social harm cost. And this can help to provide perspective of what that level of drug use might mean for a community. So up here, over the last 12 months, it's estimated that the average number of doses consumed per week in Paraparaumu is around at least 11,733 doses of methamphetamine consumed each week. And that converts to an estimated social harm cost of over $245,000 per week. The social harm cost is derived from the Drug Harm Index, and that uses estimates of cost from cost of personal harms like hospitalizations, premature death, but then also those kind of wider community harms, loss of tax revenue, reinvestment of profits into other crimes. So it's a really broad measure of social harm. And then the estimated money spent on drugs, that if they spent, if they were sold in gram amounts, then over $70,000 per week is spent on methamphetamine in Paraparaumu. So these are still big numbers. Having said that, the consumption is low compared to other locations across New Zealand. So how do we use this information? Well, the main way is we use it as an evidence base to support that sort of funding and resource allocation. And that includes that interagency, mental health and addiction services, as well as police response models. Some organisations might use it to fill information gaps and better understand consumption trends. And the sampling from regional towns really helps to address some of these information gaps, because that per capita comparison means we can help provide a voice for those regional towns that might be struggling with drug use, but also struggling to be heard when there's other locations with bigger populations that usually get listened to at that national level. So that's a really big bonus of the Drugs on Wastewater program. So thank you. Any questions?
So thank you very much, Marissa and Andrew, for this presentation. Somewhat illuminating in terms of, I suppose, the work that is done nationally, but also what is done in this area, and I suppose the social harm that is occurring. In terms of, so I suppose what it also shows is that Paraparaumu is actually relatively, well, it's actually one of the lower areas in the country, but even so, the social harm and the cost is actually astronomical. How does this actually, what actually is being, what ways are this being addressed, or is it, what ways is this being addressed? And I suppose also tied up with that, how publicly available is this information?
Okay, I'll start with publicly available. So at the moment, we share this information, with Ministry of Health, with Drug Foundation, with different agencies that might need to know, but also within police and customs. We put quarterly reports up on the internet, the police website, that show that kind of national picture and at a district level, so not individual sites named at this point. We are working toward making it more publicly available at that site level if each council is comfortable with that. Initially, when the program was set up, there was hesitation around the sharing of site-specific information, widely. So it's been a good number of years now, and we're not seeing those negative impacts. We're seeing really good, positive opportunities for resource and action in locations that might need it. Yeah. Andrew, is there anything you wanted to add there?
No, I guess it's also really important to note that we share these with councils on an annual basis too. So we, usually at the beginning of the year, we send a report out just with site-specific information for each council. And just reinforcing the reason for this confidentiality at the beginning, before this hadn't really been done internationally either, and so there was a reluctance from quite a few councils about not wanting to be labelled the meth capital of New Zealand and that sort of thing. And so the way we got this across the line is we had to agree not to make any individual site identifiable, and that's why we group it by police district like this now. And so it's a bit of a hangover from that. I think if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't be where we are now. So it was the right thing to do at the time. But I think, like Marisa said, just with the conversation that's evolved, it's matured over time, and I think we're at the point where people can generally see that if this data was more available, it would be more used, and that's really what we want to happen, because there's no point hiding this away. If people can use it for good, then that would be amazing. And so we need to get every council on board now, to change something significant like that. But that's what we're hoping to do over the next little while, to have these conversations, get everyone comfortable, and then put that out in a more public way, so that individual community groups can use the data either for justifications using the drug harm index data, or just for tracking the trends in their community, whether the drug use is increasing or decreasing, that sort of thing.
Thank you very much for that. So there's a number of other questions I have here in front of me. So first of all, we'll move on to Councillor Coe.
Thanks, guys. This is really scary information. Hey, I have a number of questions. I'll just fire them off. Is this being funded by out of the police budget? That's the first question. And are you testing only in Paraparaumu in the Kapiti area? Is there potential to increase that to other towns? Otaki, Waikanae. Who knows what those old people in Waikanae get up to?
So the answer to the first two questions is yes. It's funded by police, and Paraparaumu is the only site in the Kapiti Coast area that we currently sample from. In terms of other options, the Site X that Marisa described before is one that's not part of the program necessarily, but we'd go around tending to be smaller places or areas of concern where we sample just for a discrete 3 months, and then we'll move to another site. And so that's a way of allowing us to be able to go and look at some of these sites that haven't been able to be included, but we don't want to ignore them entirely. So there's an opportunity to put some sites forward to be considered for that. Obviously, there's only for a year, so it might take a little while to get to that. And the program is dynamic. We're always looking for ways to improve it as well. So never say never. I guess that's where we're at now.
Yeah. A couple of other questions. You mentioned there's about 11,000 users per week in Paraparaumu. What does that equate to roughly in terms of people, users, looking at an average usage?
That's difficult. So 11,000 doses, a dose is only kind of 20 milligrams. So and the way you use methamphetamine is you might have you might sit and have several doses in a session. Heavy use can be kind of up to 1 gram a day, maybe a bit more, 2 grams a day. It's really difficult to determine number of people from that information, because some people might just have a couple of hits, some might sit there and binge for 3 days in a row, taking lots and lots and lots. So it's really, it's complex, it's difficult to work that out.
But it's
That's
likely
where
to
other
be.
data sources like surveys are really
Yeah.
important that complement this data, right? So that's not something that wastewater can give us any insights into.
But it's
It is.
likely to be several thousand rather than several hundred. Is that? I mean,
No,
several-
people? No,
Yeah.
much smaller than that, I'd say. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last question is, what can we do at council to help progress your initiatives here?
Yeah, I guess that's a great question. I think working closely with your local police, but also with community groups that might be working in this mental health and addiction space, seeing what they need to help get access to a wider range of people, promoting, even educating. Education, I think, is really important, but sort of honest communication that helps to remove the stigma, so that people do come forward and look for help, because that's a big part of the difficulty with especially with methamphetamine. People want to keep it secret and under wraps, and don't want to admit that vulnerability. And so if there are education campaigns, try and keep them in ones that help to promote accessing help, rather than making people embarrassed or
Yep.
or harming their image of their family. Yeah.
Thank you.
For me, the opposite of that question is really important as well. What can we do for you? So we provide these reports once a year, but if there's anything else in between times or any more information, and I'm sorry, Marisa, I know it's not like you don't already have enough to do, but we want to be able to share this with you, and we want to make a difference and not just create numbers for numbers' sake. So yeah, please reach out if there's anything any information or data that we can give you out of this, either out of cycle or different information that we're not giving you already that we might have. It might not be possible, but yeah, please reach out and we'll see what we can do to help.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Coe. So we'll now move on to Mr. Olsen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really, really interesting. My question, I'm not sure if you can answer it. It might be for staff, and there may not be anyone who can answer right now. So maybe we can get ask this and get an answer later. But because the collection's taken from the Paparam wastewater plant, and Paparam also processes Waikanae and Raumeti, I'm just wondering if where the sample was collected from. If that is just taken from a place which includes Paparam, or if it does combine all, Waikanae, Paparam and Raumeti. So I think that would be good for clarification on the numbers, if we could get that answer at some point. Thank you.
So if I can just add to that, I suppose what percentage of our the Kapiti Coast is actually included in that data? Because I suspect that Otaki is not. So just to add to that point, be interested to hear your comments on that.
Otaki definitely isn't. Waikanae, I have seen that it is part of the catchment, but I'm not sure exactly where it comes in. Andrew, do you know?
Not off the top of my head. I've got a feeling it is, but I wouldn't be 100% sure. Normally the samples are collected at the inlet to the wastewater treatment plant. So unless there's two separate inlets, I think they would be combined together. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. And this is something that we get off the wastewater treatment plant staff, the population, which hopefully includes all of those catchment areas, to allow us to do these comparisons. Yeah, I need to check on that one.
So from my understanding, all the wastewater from Waikanae does come down here, but whether it's the same inlet, I don't actually know.
And Raumeti as well.
Yes, and Raumeti. Yes, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so I think, we're getting down to some tin tacks here, but yeah, so now we'll pass on to Mr Moore.
Morena, Marissa and Andrew, thanks for this. As Councillor Coe said, this is scary, but really important information to have, and a subject we often don't get to know. But I think the discussion around understanding this data and its origin is really critical, because sharing any of this in our communities and how we publicise this is really quite important. I can see Simon Black from the Otaki Community Board is dying to ask some questions for his constituency. So my question would be around about how do you make decisions about where you're going to sample from? You did say you go into some communities and do a mobile or a temporary unit, because we may have some information on where in particular areas might be worthy of monitoring and looking at. So that and understanding clearly where this data has come from in terms of the wastewater, if it does include other communities, because to say it's just Paraparaumu is one thing, but if it does include other parts of our district, we would really like to know that too. Thank you.
Okay, so initially the sites were chosen originally for population coverage, trying to get some of the the bigger cities, and then we also wanted to ensure that there was more regional representation across the different police districts. Andrew, do you know specifically how Paraparaumu was chosen?
That was one of the original ones. I think it was for geography reasons, to be honest. Yeah, when we started, there were 37 sites, about half as many as now. So the brief was to get as much population coverage as possible. So we got, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, those big ones. And we kind of went down to there. I think we got to about 30, 32 or so. And then I think we might have cut a couple. So at the end, it was about making sure we had reasonable geographical coverage, and then a couple of sites of concern as well, just based on what information police had on those and needed to know. So the major component was population coverage at the beginning. But yeah, I think where do we have? Yeah, so there's Wellington. We've got the sites there. And then Paraparaumu, and then the next one up to Levin as well. So I think they wanted something in between, and also a bit of a commuter belt from Wellington, being reasonably close.
Some of the other limitations, aside from budget and not being able to test absolutely everywhere, some of the other limitations are actually to do with population. This is a tool that works best on a bigger population. Otherwise, you start to see really big variation if one person leaves the catchment zone. If people drive through and urinate on their way somewhere, then you see that those kind of fluctuations too. So it can really, there's also ethical considerations if we're testing smaller locations that we don't want to be able to identify individuals that if all the meth use went down because one person or a family left for the week, you can start to see how that could cause issues. But yeah, so there's a number of factors that we need to put in, then also infrastructure and the ability to be able to get an auto sampler in and test, and then also council's ability to or treatment plant ability to provide the samples for 7 consecutive days every month. There's a lot of considerations as into where we can and can't sample from. And initially it was about that understanding of New Zealand population as a whole, and since then we have added some locations that are specifically because we have concerns about them, or we had concerns at the current time or for the future, looking at changes, growth, that kind of thing. It's an information gathering tool, but it's not the only tool to help understand what's going on in a community.
Thank you. That is really interesting because I suspect that there may be some questions that will come in relation to other sites that maybe particularly have some concerns. But now I'll pass on to Mr. Black from the Otaki Community Board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou. I'm Simon Black from the Otaki Community Board. Look, wonderful presentation, thanks. I'm also a local firefighter here in Otaki. And so, we attend a number of incidents which are drug related. And so, that's really important to us. We don't know how our sample of drug use in Otaki compares with everyone else, or whether we're high above the margin or not, and what do we do here as a board, and what support do we wrap around. So my questions have been largely answered, thanks everyone. However, what is the cost of a Site X, and how do we schedule one, let's say, for Otaki, let's say?
I think we may already have you on our list.
Brilliant. When's the date then?
Yeah, good question. So within our fund, budgeting for capacity to test 4 sites a year, then the cost would be nothing to you, just having to show up and take the samples. If it were outside of that, then it would, there would be a cost involved, and feel free to reach out to me or Andrew to discuss this further. But I think there is capacity for next year. We're full up for 2025 for that Site X testing, but potentially can pop you on the list. Yep. Oh, you're on mute.
Great, thanks. I'd love to know that, and also love to know the cost of that as well.
Yep.
So we can understand as a council and as a board on how we might want to expedite that if need be.
Okay. Maybe reach out to are you able to pass our contact details on?
That's right. Well, our people talk to your people.
Yes.
Nice. Nice. Also, what other locations locally are there? I mean, we've got Paraparamu, but where's our nearest location, south and north? We're doing Levin, and we're in Wellington.
Yeah, so there's Levin, Porirua, there's Seaview, which does the huts, Mile Point, which does Wellington. There's one in Palmerston North. They would be the closest ones. There's one in Masterton as well that we sample from regularly. And related to that, I've just had a look at the catchment map. So the Paraparaumu catchment area definitely does include Waikanae, but yeah, not Otaki.
You're on mute again.
We have our own settling pond over here. So yeah, I suspected that we actually weren't included in any of those stats. And also, is it possible to, let's say, take our own samples, or set up a mechanism of taking our own samples and send them into you, as opposed to getting a Site X out?
Yes, I think so. I guess we just have to talk about how we integrate that into things, reporting for police, for example, or are you talking about just privately?
Just general sampling. So let's say, because there's limited Site X, and there's probably a cost involved with that, if there was, let's say, a program that we locally could set up so that we can actually get samples to you, so that you can get a much wider coverage of data, if we were given a procedure and a method.
You'd want this integrated into the police program, though, with the data reported to them too, so they can.
I wouldn't say why. I wouldn't see why not. Just to help everyone, because one thing I'm particularly focused on as well is more of the pesticides and the issues around food, health, and that'd be a general marker of how we're doing as a community, of our healthiness. Because I think everyone focuses on the negative drug side of things, but let's look at the other wider area. If we're below the national average, all good. But are we above the national average for other things like cancer, pesticides? You know, do we have to actually start talking to some of the farmers locally and stuff like that?
Okay, no, I mean, I think this is something, yeah, we can talk about offline, just because, yeah, but I think it's certainly possible. It's not something we've thought about, so we certainly don't have any numbers. But yeah, I don't think there's any reason we couldn't do that. So yeah, let's keep on talking about this.
That'd be awesome. Thanks, team. Great work.
I know Shelley's got some questions, so I just want to follow up on some of the questions that Simon has said. So there's a number of thoughts that are going on in terms of, you know, maybe monitoring Otaki wastewater. But I just want you just quickly explain how the testing occurs if it's one of these X sites, because I think you said it was actually only for a very short period of time. And yes, and I suppose then if there are some really high figures that are actually not in keeping with, I suppose, the whole population, is there, you know, how do you actually add it to the general consistent monitoring list?
That's a good question. Okay, so yes, for Site X, it is for 3 months of testing so that we can get a kind of an understanding of a baseline. In terms of how you then get integrated into the program, I guess that will be something that we will consider once we see results and what's going on. As Andrew said, it is dynamic, and maybe we need to look at, as the kind of appetite for this information and data grows, you know, there's a real concentration on methamphetamine with the Ministerial Advisory Group and Sprint team at the moment, so maybe there is appetite to expand further. Having said that, we've already gone through an expansion program, so
I mean, I guess for context though, we've been expanding continuously.
Yeah, over
so
time.
We started in 2016 with 2 sites. And then we added an extra site in 2017. In 2018, we went to 37. By 2020, I think we're up to 46. So we'd added an extra 9 sites over that time. We've been gradually adding a whole lot more. The last one got completed, I think earlier this year or the end of last year, to bring us up to, you know, we're at the cap, at the limit of where we're supposed to be currently, at 63. But that's not to say it's not possible to do in the future. It's just we haven't got plans currently right now. But to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if, yeah, at some point in the future there was more demand and more budget that comes. So I guess at the moment we're at capacity in terms of the lab capacity here, in terms of staff. We can always hire more, but we're at budget capacity. So if the budget increases, we can hire more staff and then we can do more. It's just right at this very moment, there's no plans.
Thank you, that's really good to hear. So now I've got one more set of questions or comment from Councillor Warwick, who is the Otaki Ward Councillor.
My question is around your data, and has it helped any communities to get increase in their funding or services for drug and alcohol? Particularly for Otaki, we have it's talked about the amount of methamphetamine in our community by principals of the local schools and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering how, if we had that testing in our community, which would be great, how could that help us with services for our people to get them well again? Because we are kind of stuck in between 2 DHBs and we're kind of a little bit isolated. So I'm just wondering if that has helped other communities to increase their drug and alcohol services.
Yes, and even the Site X information has helped because you're able to put a quantifiable number in an application, in a business case for that kind of funding and resource. We have within or housed with police, there's a Resilience to Organised Crime and Communities group that works with multiple agencies to help address not only methamphetamine use, but also vulnerable families and gang families and the like. And the information that is generated from this data does help inform locations for them to focus on and put their resource into alongside other non-government agencies that might sometimes reach out for the information to use in their applications. It just helps to have sometimes a number or something you can point to help with all that anecdotal reporting, but there should be a lot of weight put on that anecdotal reporting, because if you have principals saying that there's issues, that's your young people using methamphetamine, then that's concerning, right? So I would encourage you to have conversations with your local police as well to help try and work together on this, and I will note this down also.
And if you do want any contact with those principals, I can put you in contact with them. It's not, I don't know that it's the children, it's more than the families.
Families, yeah, but it impacts them, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. Yeah, so kind of getting that testing in Otaki would be very beneficial for us. And is there any way that we can get people to write to you or appeal for that to come to our community sooner rather than later, or to be put on that list, maybe for next year?
I think that we don't need to be inundated by just maybe one of you send through a request. But I will note this down anyway. I think we've had somebody reach out before to mention Otaki.
My other question is that in Kapiti and Te Horo and Otaki, we have a lot of rural properties. So is there any assumptions or, I mean, you can't test people's septic tanks, but is there any data that kind of assumes that there's this amount of properties that are rural, and by some mathematical equation you come up with the potential rural population that is using drugs?
We're really careful not to do that, and I understand the desire to do that as well. It would be really nice if we could, but we've found by measuring small towns in quite close proximity that have completely different drug profiles, extrapolating beyond the boundary of that isn't really something that's sensible, and we don't want to. We want the data to be as accurate as possible. We don't want to make something up and then lose confidence in it. So we're really careful to say these results only apply to the catchment area that we're collecting from. We're not extrapolating to a rural community, which does have different demographics, and I would expect them to have different drug use. We also can't extrapolate to other towns in the area, which is why we're talking about Otaki and is not included in Paraparaumu. We can't just apply that. We'd need to test it to see if it's the same. So it's just something that we just have to accept that we're missing that portion of the population.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, you'll hear from us. Thank you. It was a great presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Marissa and Andrew, for speaking us today. I saw there was a little booth at the local government conference last year, and I thought that it would be really interesting to find out more about the work that you do and how our area, I suppose, fits into this. And so I think what you've done today is you've highlighted, an area in our community that is not particularly well seen by the vast population, and it's really quite scary what you've highlighted today. And I think it's also been quite fascinating. And I actually, it's also really interesting to hear that you're potentially going to extend the type of work that you're doing into antibiotics and pesticides. And so you've heard that we've had a conversation about, other Otaki in this area, and I think, we've got some questions that we'll probably ask you in terms of whether we can get Otaki on that list of X and how much the costs would be doing it outside that. And so I just want to say thank you very much for your presentation today, which was really, really interesting, and keep up the good work. So thank you so much again. Thank you.
Thank you. Ka kite.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Goodbye. So, so now we will move on to our next presentation, which is on from predator-free kapiti. So I see we've got Peter and a few other people who'd like to come up to the front here, and we'll take it from there. Thank you. So before we get on to this, I'll just say that Hirai Paki is online. So thank you. I'll let you take it away, introduce yourselves, and
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Come along with a couple of colleagues today. Great. Thank you. My name is Peter Jones, and as of the end of last year, I think it was just before Christmas, I put my hand up to start leading the project that is Predator-Free Kapiti Coast. We've been slowly building up a small steering group, and two of whom have come along with me today. On my left here, Wayne Mitchell, who's been working on predator-free Kapiti area quite extensively over the years. Currently leads the team up there at Nikau Valley, doing a lot of good work there. And sitting down at the back is Shane Cave, who's been involved and leads the trapping team up at Whareroa Farm as well. Other members of the team we've slowly built up. We have Patton Reed, who works for DOC as a DOC ranger and has been a very useful addition. On top of that, we have Hayley Kurtzer, who's our sort of social media and youngest member of the group, as you might guess. And so she is a great addition as well. And last Friday, I met up with Asher Wilson Goldman, who I think a lot of you may well know, and is co-chair of the Wellington Conservation Board up here, as well as, I think he's got a finger in a number of other pies as well. But he's agreed to come onto our steering group as well. So we're really grateful to him bringing a bit more of that sort of governance and experience and knowledge side, along with the more hands-on trapping side that we've already got reasonably well covered. So as I say, we were born as a result of work done by the biosecurity. Is it?
Kapiti Coast Biodiversity Project.
It always gets swung around the wrong way. Kapiti Coast Biodiversity Group, who work across a number of the areas down in the southern end of the zone. Wayne is a member of that. It's chaired by Russell and Russell Bell. Got to get these names. And has other representatives from Paikokariki up to Whareroa Farm, Queen Elizabeth Park, and others. Andy Mackay, of course, is on that as well. So the idea of getting a district-wide group together came from that, and so we've been slowly getting that up and running over the last, I guess, is now sort of 7 or 8 months. Perhaps we could turn to the slides from there. Oh, this is me, right? Good, yes. Just sort of start with a couple of maps and why a predator-free Kapiti Coast. This idea has been sort of mooted not only, I think, around this table at your February meeting. I think somebody thought it might be a good idea, but I've heard of it coming up in other areas as well. Looking at the map on the left, this is from TrapNZ, and it shows some of the sort of the red areas are the project areas. So you've got there down to the south, you've got Queen Elizabeth Park in the red. Just adjoining that is Whararoa. You've got the Waikanae, there are a range of groups in there, and some more moving further north up into Te Horo, as well as Nikau Valley. Let's not leave that one out. But you can see there are a huge number of areas where there isn't anything going on. And this map shows about 70 different groups working up and down Kapiti Coast. So that's an awful lot. And yet the coverage is probably well less than 50%. So there's still a lot of work to do, and that includes in several of the urban areas. That's not to say that things are moving pretty fast, and there are new predator-free community groups popping up left, right and centre. Just on Saturday, there was a new one that got launched in Te Horo, the town area, having the beach area having launched just a few months ago. Waikanae Predator Free launches a group literally a few months ago and is going gangbusters down there. So there's clearly a lot of interest from the population around the area, and we're certainly trying to connect into that. On the right is a map from Greater Wellington, and that aims just to show the areas covered by the council itself, Greater Wellington Council, and then DOC. So you can see there's some big spaces, but largely up in the forest areas, a few more down on the southern end. What you can't see in there, again, is a lot of smaller patches of land, quite a lot of them, the Greater Wellington's KNEs, which are the key native areas that they've allocated and doing some work on. They're in the yellow, but there are quite a lot up around the Otaki area and north of Te Horo as well, but generally small and don't show up very well on a map of that scale. So it gives us an idea of what is going on. But even if we look at that left-hand map again in those red areas, we've got Waikanae and it's got a big area. We're trapping in all this area. A lot of that, I think, is still fairly aspirational, but there are a number of groups working, certainly particularly up and down the river, with the group down at the estuary, which have been working hard and doing some great work for years, to others working further up the river, and of course Te Atiawa, who are also working very hard. We had a good meeting with them just a couple of weeks ago. So moving on, we are very much in the mode of going out and meeting people up and down the district at the moment. So while I've put up a vision and following this a mission statement, these are still very much work in progress and keen to talk to members of the council, Greater Wellington Council, iwi, DOC, and various other community groups. Well, all the community groups. So to put together what is going to work, what is going to trigger further action and bring the community alive with this, to this project. The mission statement, again, should maybe just be in italics. We will keep working on that. But it's very much trying to emphasise the community nature of the project, and we won't get anywhere unless we have the whole community on board And I think that is going to be the nub of getting this thing going over the next year or so. This quote I found in the Predator Free 2050 publication, a publication of theirs that came out last year. And it just makes it very clear that there's only one way this is going to work, and that's to get the foundations right. And the foundations are by getting ourselves known within the community, get the cooperation of the community, the energy of the community, find out where that energy is and probably latch onto that and work from there. So I look at that periodically and think, okay, things aren't moving really, really fast, and try to hold back Wayne, who wants to go out and trap more and make the plans for all these great projects that we are starting to think about. But until we get this stage done and done correctly, we will be starting pretty small. So just a reminder, and to think it will take a little while. So what have we done over this last time, largely since Christmas? Well, first of all, we've been trying to build our diverse leadership group. I think on day one, the leadership group looked like Shane, Wayne and myself, so 3 retired white gentlemen, which doesn't give us a huge amount of diversity. So I'm pleased to say we've worked on that to a certain extent. Now we have the 6 of us. We have 4 males, 2 females, and the age differential is starting to spread out as well. So that is encouraging. I think we probably at this stage we've got room for a couple more, and particularly I'm looking for willing and complementary skills from perhaps some people up in the Otaki district, which is where we're currently missing. We're well represented sort of in the southern half, then up to Nikau Valley, Otaki, but further north, we're talking about a couple of forays up there over the next couple of weeks. We have been talking to a couple of people, including Kim, who usually sits on this subcommittee, who I understand is not here today. But she has been exchanging emails and so on with me in the last couple of weeks, another one this morning anyway. So we are getting there, but certainly it's that Otaki and northern area particularly where we would like a little bit more contact. So we probably have few of our own personal contacts up there, which might be part of the issue. Engaging with iwi, other local community groups, as well as the larger agencies, including yourselves, is also key to pushing us on, as I've already said. Back in February, after the February meeting of this subcommittee, the issue of, or the idea of having a pan-Kapiti predator-free group was mooted, and Andy, sitting down the back, called me and said, "You probably don't watch these videos of these meetings, but perhaps you should have a look at this one." And so followed up immediately on that, and we're very pleased to get a meeting with 4 of the councillors, and a great deal of enthusiastic support as well. So Jocelyn, Sophie and Liz, 3 I can see around the table today who were at that. So that was really encouraging, and we had some good discussions there. One of them was this idea, which is on this slide, which is a hui hosted potentially here or somewhere very close to here, with a facilitator, and bring in all of those community groups that have been out there talking to over the last few months, and will continue over to the coming months. And at that stage, I think we want to sort of, as much as possible, nail down our mission, our purpose, perhaps look at what our early projects will be, where the energy is, try and kick off that as much as we can. It's something James Wilcox, who's heads up Predator-Free Wellington. We've had a couple of good meetings with him. He says, go where the energy is. And I think for a startup like ourselves, that is really good. And we know there is plenty of energy within Kapiti for this kind of activity. So let's try to get pretty much what we're thinking. Some of these discussions are very preliminary at this stage, but short term is pretty clear and what we're focusing on at the moment. I've already mentioned gaining the community support, talking to existing participants in this activity, connecting, and maybe starting some work with some of the groups where that is going to be a natural and easy fit. Baseline monitoring is one project that we are looking at. We're looking to perhaps centralise some of the knowledge that's out there, some of the activities that is already out there. Who is doing bird monitoring up and down the Kapiti Coast? What other kind of monitoring is going? What kind of pest monitoring is going on? So both the positive and the growth in bird populations, but also some cases the growth in pest populations. So we have to look at both sides of that coin and see what data's there. Bring it in. Whareroa, for instance, where I've been personally involved as well. I know they've been doing bird monitoring for a number of years, and so there is data there already, and we'd love to know who else has been doing that. And then the next thing is, what do we need to add to that? If we're going to launch as a group right across the region, well, we'd like to know where we're starting. So hopefully in 5-10 years' time, we can tell that we have potentially made a difference. So baseline monitoring, and initially, of course, supporting other groups. Looking slightly, moving along from that, we'll be looking to review our own status from a governance point of view. We are currently operating under an MOU with the Biodiversity Project of Kapiti Coast. So we may, at some stage before too long, want to become an incorporated society or a charity, or whatever is going to be the best option there. We are already looking at what gaps, as we saw on the map, there are a lot of gaps that need filling. Some of them are quite narrow gaps. If we look at the gap, for instance, between Queen Elizabeth Park and Whareroa Farm, where we know there's extensive trapping going on already. We also know there's an expressway running through there. We have anecdotal evidence that a lot of ferrets are running down there, whether it's the cycleway or whether it's the expressway itself. And these are gaps that probably need filling, and no doubt. The other thing I think that we like about that as a project is from the coast to the Kapiti district boundary going eastward. It's probably the narrowest point as well, so it gives us some scope to achieve something without, currently we don't have funding, etc. So something we could perhaps look at. But there are obviously clearly a lot of other ones up and down the Waikanae River. I know Kevin Shepherd with his Waikanae group there is looking at all that, but perhaps that is another area where a lot of preparation work, I think, has been done already, both by the iwi in particular, I think, over quite some time, and particularly when they had the Jobs for Nature people working for them over recent years, has been done a lot of wonderful work. But of course, that's come to an end, and you've got to reevaluate what you can achieve in reality. So they're working on that, and we would love to be a part of that if that makes sense. Boundaries, all of these areas on the map where you see someone is trapping, there is an edge to that map, and pests don't really pay much attention to that. And I think part of the reason for having a district-wide group is to have a look at that kind of issue, and perhaps we can have a look at having fewer boundaries in years to come. do we look, which other way do we look at doing things? Naively, when I took this on, I also looked at what Predatory Wellington did. Start at the Miramar Peninsula, work your way across town, bit by bit by bit, move your boundary along, and job done. Not that it's easy by any stretch, but very quickly it became clear that that is not really an option for what is going on, what is realistic for Kapiti. We have a lot of different environments, from the coastal boundaries to wetlands, to dunes, and then of course the mountain to sea projects, which are fantastic projects, I think, that we'll be looking at further and hopefully working with. But also the existing jewels of the area, the remnant forests and so on, the KNEs that have already been identified by Greater Wellington, Kiuta Kitai, so that site, that Mountain to Sea project as well. All valuable bits of work, and the question is, we can't, I'm sure, do everything at once. We would love to have the budget that Wellington have, and we could probably take on more, but we will see how we get on with that from here on out. We haven't really been looking for any kind of funding. We're very much in that building up within the community stage at the moment. Longer term, definitely the landscape scale projects are what I think are the key to getting this done. And it was really interesting talking to the Taiao team at Te Atiawa, Liam and his group, and look at his maps of what in fact a mountains to sea type area looks like. And you've got the river running up here, and then it just mushrooms out into, of course, the greater catchment area. It's massive area of the land, and these are huge contributors to getting a predator-free Kapiti Coast, large areas of land. So those kinds of projects, which will need resource to get done and get done in a reasonable amount of time, hopefully something we can work with them on going forward. And I'm sure there are going to be other landscape scale projects too. Species specific, some of these are aspirational. Through the slides, I've just been throwing up random pictures. You might have seen kokako, and there's been quite talk about maybe we could get some kokako up in the forest up behind Hamimatangi, and if we do some more work up there. Large areas of land, but also critical to work on because they are great forest areas. But there are going to be others. The bittern on this page, they have been seen in Queen Elizabeth Park, and they will be existing in other wetlands, I'm sure. So what do we need to succeed? We need to become a central hub. We need to have a team of experts who may or may not necessarily be involved directly with us, but may be working already for other community or agency groups, but have a group there who can step in, give advice where that is needed, and keep us moving along. Volunteers, clearly, and community support, as I've already talked about. Funding, clearly is going to be a requirement going ahead for equipment, workspace, and various government, and everything from software packages and, perhaps even transport, things like that. Energy, I've talked about the importance of maintaining energy and finding energy out there. We think there's plenty of it. And support from the larger agencies. So that is largely what I wanted to say is about where we've got to. We're very happy to take any questions, and looking forward to support ongoing and a great relationship with this committee and councillors and community boards and iwi, I know, who sit around this table.
Well, thank you, Peter, for coming along today, along with Wayne and Shane, to support you. I think this is a great initiative in terms of having an overarching predator-free group that actually coordinates and you know looks at the long-term ways to fund our district. And I certainly agree that in terms of setting up the structure, the infrastructure, it's something that needs to be, you know, it will take time, but I think it's critical to get that right in the first instance. You mentioned Kim Tahiwi earlier on, and I know that she, you know, she's quite disappointed that she couldn't be here today, and she's really keen, you know, to talk to you and very supportive of what you're doing. And so I've got some questions, but what I'll do, I see that there's a number of other people who want to ask questions or make comments, so I'll pass it on to them first. So, so Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Peter, and all your team. This is an exciting project. It's good to get to the state, reiterating what Councillor Pavanov just said. Having an overarching thing is really needed because these things are really community driven and they've happened everywhere. We've funded from our community board 2 in Waikanae and 1 in Te Horo. The one at the beach was already funded by the trust, the Predator Free. So I'm going to say what Councillor Coe will probably say shortly. We own James Wilcox. He's one of our residents and he's an exciting champion of this around the district. What he's done in Wellington and awarded an Excellence Award in partnership with Wellington Council recently acknowledges that. So partnerships, I think what you've been discussing is the key word in all this with iwi and with community. James Wilcox often says this is a gateway drug to other things and getting other environmental protections in, you know, along the coast. You know, we partnered earlier on before we even launched the predator-free Te Horo Beach with Greater Wellington. They've now got 46 traps between the Mangagoni stream at Te Horo Beach and 30 bait stations right up to the Otaki River. So then the one started with David Walshaw, I'd like to acknowledge around this table for his work at Te Horo Beach, and John Draper, who launched just 2 weeks ago in Te Horo Greater. So it's a fantastic thing that you bring an umbrella together. What's happening in Waikanae too, at the estuary area, which is really important, but filling those gaps. So it's more of a comment, but the way community gets involved in this and really wants to be involved in this is really, really exciting. So, and a good partnership with the council coming forward will be really crucial too. So thanks for your work and bringing all this together. It's no irony that a predator-free combined group is happening in an election year. I'll just end on that note. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So I'll move on to Simon Black, who's online.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Peter. Thank you very much for your presentation and also all the initial work you're doing. It's just fantastic. It's one of the things that you know, Otaki are also very interested in, as we've got a lot of lovely natural resources around here, and we'd like to get rid of our pests as well. My comments I know you're just establishing things. A question that I've had put to me from our board chair, Cam Butler. He would like to know how Predator Free is going to work with other smaller groups, especially like Predator Free Te Horo. But I think instead of asking that question, what I'm going to do is make you an offer and say, hey, look, we'd love to have you present at our hui or even at our board meeting, next board meeting. And there are a number of groups and organisations that we can probably get you in contact with. Particularly I'm on the committee for the Friends of the Otaki River. We also have regular catch-ups with Nahapu Otaki, and also we have columns in our local papers as well. And my offer is to, you know, if we get contact quickly, we can maybe get a bit of a column about you in this next coming paper for people who are interested. So, so I understand you're going through a bit of a startup, grabbing, you know, getting your resources, and also looking at funding after that. So, yeah, appreciate all the effort you've done, and we also have Councillor Shelley Warwick in attendance around the table there, and we'd love to catch up at some stage and see what we can do for you up in Otaki.
Thanks very much, Simon. That's a great invitation. Yeah, we'll take you up on that straight away. That's good. We were just talking yesterday, actually, about the fact that someone had seen the Otaki newspaper and how they'd highlighted the startup of the Te Horo group, the column on that, and saying it's great. We we'll love to get a column in there as well. So when the time is right. But no, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So now we'll move on to Councillor Coe.
Right, thanks very much, Peter, and your colleagues. This is a really exciting initiative, and thanks for all the energy and hard work you're putting into it. And, you know, I mean, this could be bigger than Ben-Hur, I hope you realise. Hopefully you're going to sort of stay quite focused to begin with, but it has a lot of potential to extend into all sorts of different aspects of protecting our biodiversity. We did have that chat in council chambers a while back, and one of the things I raised there was, you know, how you engage the groups that are already there. It's a bit of a runaway train, and you know, the great passion that's being shown by people in this area can be a bit of a two-edged sword for someone like you coming along, because they're so focused on what they're doing and how well they're doing and getting funding, you know, to try and get them to sort of work in with an overarching group may not be the easiest thing. So I wanted to check in with you on how that's going, and also whether you're talking to council staff about this, and then also how we can potentially work together, because to me this is a great example of how council can provide some leverage to community groups, and whether there's a pathway we can look at, which I know it's a little bit early days yet, but you know, whether there could be some kind of MOU between council and an overarching group to work together to provide resources in this space. But anyway, I've thrown a lot of things in there. Perhaps you can
that's
just
good.
respond to that.
No, you're quite correct. We are very aware of the fact that the existing groups, there's a chance they could be, you know, very protective of their own patch, and we are treading, I think, very gently. We want to be able to show that we have something to offer. Now, the obvious one is that, you know, they have boundaries to where they are doing their work, and if we get a predator-free Kapiti Coast project off successfully, well, those borders will, to an extent, disappear. So, you know, there is something in it for them at the end of the day. If we do manage to get the kind of funding we think we will need to build this thing to become bigger than Ben-Hur, then we will certainly be able to assist the existing groups. The existing groups are clearly springing up around existing population centres, because that's where the people are and that's where it happens. And clearly a lot of that empty space on that first map is largely empty space. There aren't people there. It's much harder to get the coverage into those areas, and a lot of them, if we're looking out east, up into forests and such like, that's where a lot of the pests are going to be coming from. So I think it's in everybody's interest if we start looking at that, and that will inevitably support them and make their jobs easier. And then if you can get to a point where you are, instead of being a Paikokariki, you're a Miramar Peninsula, and you know you're, the only thing you've got to worry about is new infiltration of pests, would be a great place, I think, for them and for us all to be at. So that is good. Yeah, but the key point is very aware of that. There's been some great work being done. A lot of people have been working on these issues for years. So we certainly don't want to be seen as the new boys coming in and telling people what to do. But we would like to become an area where there will be, we can add some value, whether it's expertise, data, those sorts of things, which I think instantly are going to be of value to people. On your point around council staff, well, that sounds very interesting. We have a very good relationship, of course, with Andy Mackay and his team sitting at the back there. So that is is a good start. I'd ask you what you were thinking about perhaps when you say council staff
Well,
and other areas.
I mean, we don't get involved with the operational side of things to any great extent, but my understanding is there is someone dedicated to biodiversity. Would you know, Jocelyn? So,
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll talk to Andy, and I'm sure he'll lead us in the right direction when the time comes. But at the moment, we're still, as I say, reaching out across the district.
Right.
And getting a very positive, I've got to say, reaction from virtually everybody.
And you did mention the possibility of council holding a hui to invite people to come in and talk about this concept. Is that something that you'd like to follow up on specifically?
Yes. So we've exchanged a few emails with Jocelyn and Sophie on this. That came up in that February meeting, and I think that's a very good idea, and may just get to the stage will bring us some closure about this opening sort of stanza of what we're doing at the moment, where we get to if we do that. And I think we're toying around with maybe an August date or something like that. We talk to everybody one-on-one over the next couple of months, and then we bring everybody in. Hopefully we've talked to everybody individually there and give people time to think about, okay, what would a predator-free Kapiti Coast look like? What would we like from them? And what goals can we set, as well as that vision and mission statement.
So that's in progress now, is it? Or is there something we need to make
So Sophie and I have had a couple of conversations on that. So I think there's some juggling around going on.
That's cool.
So we're very keen on that idea. And I think that would be a good point at which we can sort of leap off from, take things a bit further.
Yeah, cool. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coe, and your comments, Peter. So I'll now move on to Councillor Hanford.
Thanks, Jocelyn. And thanks, Peter and the rest of the crew. I'm really excited about this prospect, and already, as has been mentioned, the energy that's been put into getting it to this point, and the slides are beautiful. A cool way of telling the story. In terms of the August conversation, so I've started some chats about the use of the venue and whether that's possible to have it here, but then we can make sure that everyone's free on a kind of mid to late August date. One question I had in your chats with the Predator Free Wellington team, at what stage did they weave in a commitment to a date that they wanted Wellington in their case to be predator free by? Is that going to also be a cornerstone to the way you're talking about this Predator Free 2050? Is that part of the headline, or are you currently just thinking of yourself as Predator Free Kapiti Coast?
The vision, but whether it's Predator Free 2050, that's got to be the last date. I think because the whole task here in Kapiti is not going to be that start in Miramar or start in Pukerua Bay, Paikokariki, move north. It is going to be different. And I think the difference in terrain here complicates it versus being largely urban in the area that Wellington are working their way through. They've got a great system that they got working very well on the peninsula there, and that works really well for urban areas. So we can translate it to that, and we can use the learnings from Kevin up in Waikanae and others who've been doing that in urban areas in Kapiti as well. But am I going to give you a date that's early in 2050? I don't think so. Wayne, any thoughts on that one? More idea than I do.
Predator Free Wellington actually run really, really differently. And in fact, they're just mobilising, running right across the top of all the other groups. I say that, I mean, it's an observation really that each of the small groups is working away in their individual tasks, and it's really important that that happens. what's different apart from boundaries and having that, we can chunk off Miramar here is it is much broader, and you can't just build a line along the motorway and say we'll start up that way, because building that line itself is much more complex. It's a whole lot longer line than the Miramar Peninsula. So it really is different, and so what they're doing is they're leveraging the groups that exist. They're overlaying a whole structure, a business that's operating at $4 million operating budget a year and is being severely cut at the moment. And so part of the observation in talking to James is he thought our idea was a really, really good idea in this difficult times when funding is not so easy to get and funding is being cut, and probably Predatory 2050 might disappear for a while. We can't rely on setting up a structure that is relying on heavy operating costs. What we really need to do is mobilise energy, as you say, focus on filling in the gaps. And if and as the opportunity comes to say we can take a much more structured approach, we will then, by have a lot of the gaps filled, we'll have a lot more local energy running, and we'll be able to do a sort of an overlay and do all the measurement and so on and so forth. So it's a really, really different approach to it. The environment is different here, and in these difficult times, what we're really trying to do is move forward, but we know that the political environment is in severe change and turmoil at the moment, so we've got to try and move forward while recognising that.
Yeah, I think James's, some of the publications he's put out are really, really useful particularly for that urban eradication process. And there is a bit of that going on already in Kapiti, but there are a couple of urban areas where we are very keen, if nothing percolates up in the next few months, to try and get something started. And of course, Paraparaumu, being the largest urban area, there does not seem to be at this stage any kind of impetus going on there. I would love to hear about it if there is, and we are, one of our other priorities for the next sort of month or two is to reach out to people we know, basically, in Paraparaumu, and try and encourage someone to take something on in that area. And the other one is up in Otaki as well, which so it's two significant areas. Which, the process is, we know how to do it. We need the group to get that started.
Thank you, Peter. So now we have Mr. Olsen-Glenn.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, following up on what you just saying, I think when I was looking at the map there, I saw there's some big areas where there's actual council land, which is not readily publicly accessible, like the treatment plants, water plants, the depots, and, in Paraparaumu there's a huge section here. I'm wondering if you know what programs the council itself has for, controlling predators on their own land and how they're working with you, because that would be, could be an easy win as a starting place, especially in Paraparaumu, because there's quite a big block of land there which is council owned.
Yeah. I think very much going forward, looking at those public land areas, both councils, and even DOC, these are issues. These are areas we do need to look at one by one, and what the coverage is there from a trapping, pest eradication perspective. And I suspect none of them have an ambition of eradicating pests. There will be limitation going on, and as Wayne mentioned, with so much funding cuts coming through at the moment, maybe that coverage is at risk as well. Certainly on the council side, so we have a great relationship with Andy, and we'll be talking to him about how some of those council areas will fit in with sort of the greater plans as well.
Yeah, I think just follow that, maybe something for the chair actually. I'm wondering if this committee might want to, propose something a motion that the council does look at this and work with you guys on that.
I can certainly take that on board, but I'd like just to say I've got a few comments, but in relation to what you've just said, so I know, for example, in the Farrells Reserve, which is council land, that there is a trapping program in there. So I think it's about, and there's probably other KCDC and GW land that is also owned where there are trapping programs going on. It's about coordinating everything so you actually know what is being done on the ground and where the gaps are. And I suppose that also leads to one of the other comments that I'm going to make, whereas, you know, it's great that James Wilcox is in our area to be able to, you know, to pick its brains on how to set this up and how to move forward. But I suppose one of the big differences between what we're trying to do here and what is occurring in Wellington is that we have both urban and rural areas. And it's really interesting, I suppose, Waikanae and Te Horo, some of those rural areas are involved in this, but Paparamo, there's nothing there. And it's about how you actually, because there's no point having intensive trapping areas or trapping areas and then have gaps, because we know what's going to happen there. And it's about managing that. And I suppose the way the funding is, it's my understanding, the way the funding's been set up is actually more concentrated in urban areas rather than rural areas. I don't know if you're going to make any comment just about some of the comments I've made there, and then
I might let Wayne take that one.
Yeah, and then I've got some other thoughts.
It is complex, and you're absolutely right in the observations. I mean, when you look at these maps, the Predatory 2050 map and the Trapping Z and so on, just because they're there doesn't mean there's a huge amount of activity going on. Some of them were put up. So, for example, some of the GW ones and DOC ones, they have programs that might have been funded for a year or 18 months or a couple of years in the past, and therefore they exist, but is not necessarily doing anything at the moment because funding is. And the same in the project groups, the individual volunteer groups. Some of them set up, and then we've been doing ours for 9 years, and we find, there's fluctuations in the amount of energy in the local area and so on. So it is a complex situation, and just because we think there's something going on. So if we look at predatory, Te Horo will go really well because James is there and he's got some energy. Predatory Waikanae is going great guns because there's lots of energy, and they've got Lions Club support and so on. And Kevin Shepard is a really energetic, driven person. Predatory Raumati has had a slow start, and they've got quite good ambitions and so on. So we can't just leave them to do that without both filling in the gap but supporting the teams there. And it is not a simple environment. It's not just look at the map and see what's going on, because the reality on the ground is actually it isn't necessarily what's happening, and you can't treat them all the same.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just wondering, maybe, so when we've finished with your presentation, we're probably going to take a 5-minute break, but maybe, Glenn, if you'd like to maybe start think about some words that we could put forward as a recommendation. I just want to, so I think also it's good to hear that you are slowly working with all the groups that are on the ground, and you're right in terms of having to tread carefully there, because they have quite focused, but and be very clear about what the overall objective is of a predator-free kapiti group would be. And I think it's really good to have a hui, because for a number of reasons, but I think, as with a lot of other volunteer groups, often they work in isolation, and when they can come together and talk and share, and find out where the overlaps are and where the gaps are, it actually just makes a far more synergistic effort, which will add to a better outcome. So I suppose also too the funding side of things too. I think it's really quite important to think about, and obviously by KCDC staff being in here, obviously they're really interested and supportive of this. So you've got DOC and GW as well, and I think adding all that together, you know, and given time, we will end up having a really, really great group that's going to basically deal with our pests. So, and then just pointing, just I suppose on that, so here we're dealing with, just to be very clear, the mustelids and the rats and the mice, but not rabbits, and maybe possums. I think we just need to be quite clear in terms of what, you know, what we're actually looking at here.
Yeah.
We do need to mention cats.
I think Predator Free 2050 as a program is all about possums, mustelids and rats. And Predator Free Wellington, that's what they have on their headline. Another major difference between Wellington and the Kapiti Coast is pests like rabbits, deer, other feral cats, very much a live issue, and we're seeing more trapping of that, hearing about it, up and down the coast, and they're truly feral cats. So we're probably limiting our headlines at the moment to those Predator Free 2050 three groups. I imagine the new Te Horo group will be talking an awful lot about rabbits. And we quite get that. If we get rid of rabbits, that's going to limit the ferret population, I would think. So there's the good reason to be looking at some of the other things, but they're probably not the first point of call on our agenda. But they are, you know, they're vital, really. Yeah, definitely.
It depends on the opportunity. And so, for example, if there was this idea of having a lizard-free fence in Queen Elizabeth Park, for example, if somebody ever thought of that, they might want to target some different pests and so on, and we might want to help them build boundaries around that to limit the spread of those sorts of pest populations. If you look at K&Es, what flora and fauna are they trying to protect there, and can we help enhance what they're doing by helping them build a slightly broader coverage to target, I dare say mice, but that's a bit more complicated, but to look at predators around special jewels such as that, and how can we help them protect those environments? Or if there was a species particular, like the lizards, that we could help with a bit of focused effort, I think would be a good idea.
So that's, I think, you know, that last comment I think is also really important to consider too. So it's, you know, looking at things broadly, but also delving into particular areas that might be key ecosystems that and species that we want to protect. So we've run out of questions, but I think, you know, as you can see, that people are very, very interested in this topic and are really keen to get this off the ground. So thank you, Peter, Wayne and Shane for coming along today in your presentation, and please let us know what we can do to help you facilitate moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think later on we're probably going to, after we've had a break, we may well have a recommendation come from this committee as well. So thank you very much.
Right. Thank you all very much.
So now we'll take a 5-minute break.